and right now we're seeing about 400% growth year over year. And very happy to announce that as of last Thursday, we secured another round of venture capital funding of $6.5 million that, again, will lead to increased growth in this area. So we're very excited about that. All right, let me just put the slide here. So, why are we here? And I appreciate everybody being here. And this is sort of a funny little cartoon that I've been showing that people seem to get a kick out of. It resonates with is, we're also busy. Do we really have time to be here on this webinar? And here's a great example of these poor caveman guys are dragging this cart with a square wheel, and the sales guys right behind them trying to sell them round wheels, and they're saying they're too busy to talk to them. So today, you're in procurement. You have a procurement solution. It's probably doing some things for you. But what we hope today is to show you that SourceDay is that round wheel for you, and that could help you accelerate things and move things much faster along. So a little about what we're hearing in the marketplace with respect to procurement. And a lot of the organizations, and certainly the organization I work for, we spend a lot of time in optimizing things like our sales order process, our manufacturing process, our inventory process, but very little effort and focus was ever put in the procurement and supply chain side. And so this is still an area of the business that is still largely untouched. It is very manual for most organizations. In fact, what we've been able to find through research is that 50% of organizations are still pretty much unhappy with how they're managing procurement. 35% of organizations today are still using separate type of ways to manage procurement, and 64%, so 64% of you today, and probably most of you today, are looking for better ways to streamline procurement, recognizing that this is an area of your business that needs to be more optimized. So supply chain is, critical, right? We think about, well, we need that material to come in, we need to build our widgets, we need to stock our shelves, but really, if you think about it, the supply chain has an overall impact of the organization. They're almost as important or as important to the organization as anybody in the organization, a salesperson, an accounts payable person, someone in assembly or in inventory. And that's because they impact everything, right? So they impact our ability to think about if you were out buying this material and you had 99% of what you need to ship something, and that 1% is still missing. You're tying up working capital and inventory, or maybe you schedule production, and now that one supplier is going to let you down, and so now you have to reschedule production, maybe work overtime, maybe work the weekends. Maybe you're gonna have to make that phone call to your customers, and so there's all kinds of things and areas of the business supply chain impact. It's not just about buying a widget and negotiating the best price. This slide here is really, of all the slides that I want to show today, this is the one that really kind of sink your teeth into and understand. This represents what most of the organizations that we deal with are experiencing prior to using SourceDay. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side here in the green is an organization that's running an ERP application. This could be made to manage, it could be intuitive, it could be SAP, it could really be any sort of ERP application that is out there. You've made an investment in this ERP. Your business is driving forward with inputs and outputs that are being implemented and goes through that system. The reality, though, is like ERPs have gaps, and you probably see those day in and day out. And the area that we deal with for SourceDay is that really gap of procurement and helping organizations bridge that gap between what's going on in the ERP and what the supply chain is doing. And so an example I always give is that, think about this. When you have your ERP, maybe you're running MRP, or you're running some sort of other APS or some sort of planning engine in your system. With that, you're firming purchase orders. When you firm a purchase order in your ERP today, your ERP system thinks that PO is perfect. It thinks the dates are going to be good, held to. It thinks the pricing and quantity and all that is going to be perfect. But in reality, it's not. And your procurement teams know that the information from the supply chain is probably going to be different. And so what ends up happening is that your procurement teams leave your ERP. So the very thing that we're using to make all these important decisions we're outside of that system, and we're in emails and spreadsheets and phone calls, and we're collaborating with our supply chain on RFQs, on purchase order acknowledgements, on purchase order updates. Multiple people in the organization could also be interacting with the same suppliers. So you might have, 2 or 3 separate versions of a spreadsheet being passed back and forth between your supply chain and your buyers and managers. Of course, suppliers, they respond back the exact same way. So what you end up having is you have all this information going back and forth between procurement and suppliers, and rarely, and probably most importantly here, is rarely do we see that this information on a regular basis makes it back into the ERP. I always ask, I do quite a bit of speaking sessions, and the first question I always ask is, who has an ERP system, and that's always 99%, everyone raises their hand. Then I ask who in here trusts the data in their system, and I usually get a pretty unanimous. Most people have problems with data in their system. And when you really start to peel back that and understand it, it really stems from what's going on with what your supply chain is telling you. If your supply chain data, if the dates that your supply chain is providing you is not making it back into your ERP system, then everything downstream is going to be inaccurate. You're going to set up incorrect production schedules. You're going to communicate poor delivery dates to your customers. Your stakeholders will have bad information, etc. So having a system that's not updating your ERP means that you have bad data, and most likely that's impacting your business. So what ends up happening for buyers today and procurement teams is that they spend, because they have these disjointed manual systems and they don't have a lot of automation at their disposal, they spend quite a bit of their day doing a lot of manual processes, a lot of non-strategic things like checking on orders, placing a PO and calling the supplier the next day to see if they got it, seeing if the supplier has any updates, or chasing after a late material, late POs. All those things are, sort of routine, tactical things that are not providing a lot of, strategic value to the organization. And also procurement teams, we've talked to a lot of buyers, they're frustrated because they feel like they can't finish their day. They've got all these things they need to buy, all these things they need to tackle, but someone just walked in their office with their hair on fire saying that the part's not in the door and they've got to go chase after it. So what this really leads to is what SourceDay brings to the table and the value that we bring to our customers. SourceDay is an application that integrates with ERP applications like Made to Manage and Intuitive. We spend a lot of time. Our application has a lot of automation built into it as well. So what ends up happening is, instead of today, like for most organizations, they cut a purchase order in their ERP, let's say Made to Manage. Now they take that PO and they email it out to the supplier. Then they follow up with the supplier a day or two later to see if they got it. And then sort of the chase begins after that. With SourceDay, what we're doing is we're automatically picking up that purchase order right out of your ERP system. Once we see that it's a brand new purchase order, we send it to the supplier. Suppliers access SourceDay through a modern browser, so Chrome or Internet Explorer, Safari. Those are the browsers that your supplier needs. There's no software really or hardware that they need to acquire or purchase to be able to interact with you on the SourceDay system. Automation is built around purchase order management. So once the purchase order is created and we pick it up, we start tracking it for you. So we make sure the supplier acknowledges the PO. If they don't do that after 24 hours, we go after them and make sure they do. We recognize that the material is near its due date and remind the supplier that it's coming their due date. SourceDay will remind them when, or we'll go after them and communicate to them when the material is late. So these things are automated things that are built in the application that help free up buyers to be able to do other things like find better suppliers, negotiate better pricing, work on better contracts, those kind of things that are more strategic to the company versus just chasing after a PO acknowledgement. All that is automated within the SourceDay platform. Another thing I just want to point out here too is SourceDay also includes a supplier performance module. So we do supplier scorecards and monitor supplier performance. So if your organization is ISO, and you're required to grade your suppliers, or for the reason you're grading your suppliers, or need to, SourceDay is automatically doing that for you. You set those parameters up in the platform, and we begin to grade those suppliers for you. The nice thing is that your suppliers can see their grades themselves, so they're not reliant on you to be able to provide that score. They can just log in and see that. So with that is we're giving buyers back substantial amount of their day to be able to do more strategic things for the organization. So SourceDay takes the heavy load of doing that transactional type things and frees your procurement teams to be able to be much more strategic in their day. Following along here, you're probably asking yourself or saying to yourself, this is interesting. Sounds like a supplier portal application, which it is. We are a supplier portal at its lowest common denominator. We're very feature rich, but essentially that's what we are. And so part of what's going to happen here is your suppliers will need to be onboarded into the platform. That might be a question you're asking, which is, we've always wanted to adopt a supplier portal. It's something we've talked about internally, but we really don't know if our suppliers will do it. And also, it can be a major burden on our IT department to be able to do that. And that's actually very accurate. It's certainly something that we were challenged with when I was in manufacturing. So what we did with SourceDay is we decided that we were going to build that into our business model. So we do two things really. We provide you a software application that you and your suppliers will leverage. We also we're also 100% responsible for the users. So if you have 2 or 3 buyers in your organization and you have 20, 30, 40, 50 suppliers that you work with on a regular basis, SourceDay will take the responsibility to set up all those accounts. We will train all of those users, and we will support all those users. And so it's not on you or your IT staff to have to take that burden on. That is something that SourceDay will do for you. Because of that, we see a pretty high success rate, 94% in fact, of suppliers that have onboarded successfully in the platform. And these are, these are ranging from mom and pops, small organizations, if you have mom and pop suppliers, all the way up to large suppliers. Like we have Grainger and Avnet and Arrow and Cummins Diesel and some really large suppliers that are using the platform today. And all of them are getting value out of the application. They're getting access to information that they've never had before. So it's a very powerful tool for them as well.
Yeah, you have multiple systems.
All right. So a couple other things I wanted to show you here is, and we're about to turn it over here to Philip so he can take it and run with it. This is what our customers are telling us today. Right out of the gate, when they start adopting SourceDay, we talked about reducing and eliminating a lot of those transactional tasks every day and automating those. Well, that essentially frees up for our customers about 25% of their week. So that's a full day to be able to free up to go do something else for the organization. We talked about the importance of how ERPs need to be updated and accurate. So we do that. So every single purchase order that we touch in SourceDay, we make sure that your ERP is updated and accurate with the latest and greatest information. So if a supplier changes a date, or if a supplier changes a quantity, or a supplier ships something, we make sure that that information makes it into your system so that when you're running production schedules and you're making customer commitments, that you have that information accurate. Supplier performance.
I'm not sure if we lost Clint. I just want to see, can anyone still hear me? This is Philip at SourceDay.
I can hear you, Philip.
Okay, let me reach out to him and let him know that no one can hear him. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I got some feedback that looks like I'm still on the line.
Yes, you are. You want me to turn the screen over to you, or what do you want me to do?
Yeah, you know what? Go ahead and throw it over, and we'll just jump into the demo. I think this was close to the last slide, or when he gets logged back on, he can probably show. I'll kick it back over to Clint to show the remaining slides.
Okay. I just flipped it over to you.
Okay, perfect. I just grabbed it. And to confirm, you're able to see my screen. It should have the purchase orders on the top left.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So I'll jump in, and then again, we'll kick it back over to Clint when he gets back on. So this purchase order screen is going to be the main dashboard you're going to use to manage purchase orders once they're released inside of the ERP. So as far as creating POs, that's going to remain the same. We're not changing the way that the ERP is creating or you're generating POs. But we do want to do is automate all of that communication after it's been created. So instead of having to manually generate a purchase order, throw it inside of an email, and then fire that off to your suppliers individually, SourceDay is going to automate that complete task, as well as automating all of those follow-ups that they're having to do individually. So for instance, if I have a PO that I sent out and the supplier has not acknowledged it, I can automatically have SourceDay reach back out to that supplier, reminding them that they have pending purchase orders that still require that very first touch as far as looking for confirmation that they've received and then can meet the criteria of the purchase order. And this will really drive us into pending. And we're going to walk through these statuses and talk about the automation behind them. But I'll start with pending. And pending is that that acknowledgement stage. So as soon as purchase orders are released inside of the ERP, we're going to automatically pick those up. They're going to drop inside of a pending status, and it's going to fire off a notification to the supplier. And then in turn, what the buyer is going to do is we're going to manage this by exception. So right now I have 95 pending purchase orders. If it was Monday morning and I just released a group of POs, I now have 95 that are out in my supplier's hands, waiting for them to acknowledge. As they acknowledge these, this number is going to begin reducing, right? Because this is only going to hold the purchase orders that still need that acknowledgement. So I'll let the automation run on its own. So it sent out the initial notification. I have some automation sending out reminders every day of the week until I've gotten this acknowledgement. So when I log in on a Wednesday, I may have 14 purchase orders left inside of this pending status. And those are the ones I'll address as the purchasing member. As far as making a phone call, or maybe I want to send out some personal notifications to these suppliers, putting in my own personal touch. But what we want to do is reduce all of the noise, so to speak. So if we cut a bunch of orders, 80 to probably 90% of the suppliers want to acknowledge and put those orders into their system. And we want to show and highlight, so to speak, those problem suppliers, the one that need that extra attention, that extra nudge in the shoulder to make sure they're getting you this information. And that's why we base it on exceptions. So we're going to, with automation, get 80 to 90% of your acknowledgements, and then the remaining 10% will sit in this stage and have a history of how many touches they've already had. So when you're making those phone calls, you're spending your time wisely and working with the suppliers that actually need your attention. So now that we've talked about, how we're picking up orders, notifying suppliers, I do want to jump over to the supplier's view, which I'm going to jump over there now, and we're going to see supplier on the top right. The first thing you'll notice about this view is it's identical. And this is, of course, by design. We wanted to make sure that there was no confusion between buyers and suppliers. And I also mentioned that you're still going to be making phone calls. When you pick up the phone and you call that supplier, you shouldn't spend half the phone conversation trying to locate the order in question. If I want to talk about a pending purchase order, we're both going to select pending in the same place, and the details are going to be listed below so we can quickly find, and then we can address and take action on these POs. In a typical experience, what suppliers are going to receive is an email notification anytime a purchase order needs their attention. All of our notifications go out consolidated, so we're actually reducing the amount of emails that suppliers are receiving currently or today from their customers. And the way we do that is, since we can consolidate, that means instead of them getting 10 emails for each of the new 10 POs that the buyers just released, with SourceDay they would get one email showing them all 10 of those POs that have been released, and then we provide them an action button inside of the email, which drives them right into their SourceDay account so that they can quickly review, and then more important, acknowledge those POs. Next thing I want to walk through is the acknowledgement. During the acknowledgement process, one of the things suppliers have the ability to do is pull down documentation. So if you have customers that are sharing documents, or you yourself need to share documents with suppliers, anything physically, it could be drawings, specifications, anything up and above. And the file type is not unique, so it could be anything from a CAD drawing to Excel to a PDF. They're all supported through SourceDay, and we also have no size limit. We see a lot of folks that will try to share documents in email, but due to the sizes, they're either spending a lot of time zipping those files, or they're creating some Dropbox link or using a Google Drive at certain times, where with SourceDay, everything can be shared through our system. And what's also really nice is it stays linked to what you shared the documents with, whether that be a supplier company, so you could update or upload documents like a holiday schedule. And then you could link that holiday schedule and send it out to all of the suppliers, so that they have access to that. I could share a document with a specific PO or a specific purchase order line. And then a really powerful way we see documents shared is at an item level. And this allows you to link documents to a specific part number. And now any PO that's open with that part listed is going to automatically have those documents attached. So if you have existing POs that are open, they're going to automatically link it to all of those, as well as any new POs that are coming into the platform. The next thing we'll cover is the acknowledgement itself. So I'm going to select multiple lines here, and we're going to go ahead and action these with the acknowledgement. During the acknowledgement process, suppliers have the ability to suggest changes and add questions and comments. So I'm going to suggest a couple of changes here with information of why they're changing. Keep in mind these are only suggestions, so they can't force any change directly back into the ERP. A lot like EDI, this does require review and acceptance from a buyer before the change gets written back into the ERP itself. So maybe this is a minimum order quantity, and then we'll change a date just so you can get a good idea of how each of these look when it comes back to the buyer side for review and acknowledgement or acceptance. And I'm going to go ahead and select update. Once updated, it's going to acknowledge every single one of the 7 lines I had selected. We're going to see pending for the supplier has now been reduced. So now they know they have 23 PO lines that are still open, requiring that acknowledgement. And it's sent an email automatically to the buyer, so the buyer's aware that there's requested changes and that it needs their attention to continue the process of the purchase order. And then the last thing I want to show from the supplier side is the ability for them to generate the physical purchase order. So if you are manually generating and emailing out purchase orders today with your suppliers, this can be automated. We empower suppliers to be able to generate this information right out of our system. The benefit here is one, of course, on the buyer side. It's a huge task that administratively is being done if they are having to manually do it today, as far as generating and emailing out purchase orders, but it's also updated POs. You know, buyers will also get a lot of emails asking for an updated PO because there's been a change since the initial release. And then on the supplier side, they never have to wait on a buyer to get this data that's needed to update their system. So if there's ever a change or a new PO created, the supplier will always have the ability to access this physical copy to update into their ERP directly. So the next thing we want to look at is going to be back on our buyer side. And we're going to see Richard on the top right. And this is going to drive us into Richard's updates. So during the acknowledgement of those 7 purchase order lines, we did have some suggested changes on 3. And this is where the buyer is going to address those changes. So I would have received an email that's alerted me that there have been requested changes coming from a supplier. A hyperlink is going to drive me right into my SourceDay account, and now I can review those here. Any comments that are listed or any questions are going to be surfaced as a yellow post-it note that you can see here on the left. By simply hovering over these post-it notes, we can see that communication that they've shared along to us. And then if I scroll over to the right, we're going to see in red the physical requested changes coming from the supplier. So this is a quick identifier so that we can address and see if there's anything physically they want to change to our PO. And once reviewed, we're ready to make a decision. So now we can decide how we want to action these orders. I'm going to start with accepting a couple changes. So I'm going to select a few lines here. So let's do maybe the new quantity and date. And we're going to go ahead and go to actions, go to our accept reject screen. I have the same PO listed here, but keep in mind when it comes to actioning purchase orders, buyers can interact with multiple POs, with multiple suppliers in one action, which means when I'm accepting these 2, which I'm about to go ahead and do, this could be 20 different POs with 20 different suppliers, and all of our automation is the same, and it still only takes one action to do so. In this case, I have 2 POs, and when I hit accept, this is going to do 2 things. One, and most important, this is now going to write this information back into the ERP directly for those unique purchase orders. It's also going to send out a notification to the supplier so that they're aware that their request has been accepted, and they'll have now the ability to generate a physical updated version of that PO as well. And then secondly is rejecting something. So there are going to be times that suppliers request to change things or to change segments of the PO, something like a cost. And in this case, we're going to let them know that we have contract pricing. And this is a way to select that in bulk, so I don't have to write it for each line. If this was 100 lines and I'm rejecting them all for contract pricing, I could type that once and it would pre-fill it in for me. And then I can go ahead and reject. As soon as I reject something, it's going to, again, fire off an email to the supplier so they know that this request has been denied. It's also going to move these lines into an awaiting response status so that I can track any purchase order line that I've personally requested information on from a supplier and they have not yet gotten back to me. And all POs will physically remain here until we've seen the response from the buyer, the action, from the supplier, the action from that supplier updating us with new information. And then we also build automation around this. So as soon as it hits awaiting response, they're going to get a notification from SourceDay. And then based on the user's cadence, in this case, again, we have Richard. He may say every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I want all suppliers that I'm currently awaiting responses on to be reminded to come in here and provide that response. And those continue to go out until the supplier's action to those POs. And then what we also don't do is anytime you reject something, we're not going to change the ERP. We're only overriding what's currently in your ERP if there's an accepted change that has come from the supplier. So at this time, we've covered the acknowledgement process, which does take a lot of time, a lot of personal attention, making sure that all new POs are getting acknowledged. But once we have these acknowledged purchase orders, there's other times that we have to re-engage with our suppliers looking for updated information. One of these moments is when a PO line falls late. As much as we'd like it not to happen, it does occur. And when it does, this is where we see a lot of spreadsheets getting involved, right? We're creating open order reports or sending them off to our suppliers. Maybe we ask our suppliers to get it back to us by the end of the day on a Wednesday. And then if they get it back to you, that's excellent. But now we have to transpose all of that information from a spreadsheet back into the ERP. Or worst case, you don't get it back at all, and you're chasing down that supplier because you need to update these PO lines. With SourceDay, one, we're going to automatically real-time put all of your late lines in one place, so there's no question of how many current open late purchase order lines you have at any given time. We're also going to notify suppliers as soon as they have a line late with your company, and we're going to ask them to provide you an updated due date. This also has automation, so I could set up that every single day of the work week, Monday through Friday, as long as a line stays in this status, my suppliers will receive requested actions to come in here and update me with an updated due date. When they provide a new date, it won't automatically write to your ERP. It will require review and acceptance from the purchasing member or the purchasing group. So when they provide a new date, it's going to just follow the same workflow. It'll go into updates, and then upon acceptance, we'll write the data back into the ERP, and it'll ultimately leave the late status altogether. Late has worked really well. We've had a lot of excellent feedback coming from our current customers, but what we heard very quickly once we put it into the platform was, as great as late works, is there any way we can proactively reach out to our suppliers instead of waiting for it to fall late altogether? So, we kind of all got together internally and used our customer base to create what we call Radar. So now what Radar is doing is allowing you to set up that proactive notifications to suppliers and view for you internally to see, what's within that Radar that makes us nervous because it's getting close to being due to our company. This setting is supplier specific. So each supplier can have their very own Radar. A local supplier across the street, a 3-day Radar may be fine. They can walk it over or drive down the street and hand it to you personally. But that 3-day Radar would not work for, a supplier that's overseas. I may want to give them a 45-day Radar because, shipping alone could take 30 days. So I just need to be much more proactive to make sure that it's on the vessel and out in the water, much further in advance. Once those settings have been determined, this is when we're going to look at all open POs. When the PO is within that window that you've set, it will fall into our radar so that you can see it here. It's also going to trigger a notification out to these suppliers, and it's going to ask them to confirm the order. So this is really automating the confirmation stage of the PO, and this is a huge reason we see a large increase, or the 35% increase of on-time delivery, is because it's keeping all of this information up front of the buyers and the suppliers so that we can get the most up-to-date information as soon as possible. There's also abilities to flag critical items, and in our system we call these hot. So if you have items that are critical now to the business, whether there's a large order that needs to ship or something needs to be expedited, you can flag them hot in SourceDay. It's going to keep them in this one location, so you'll always know how many open hot purchase order lines that you have. And it's going to notify suppliers asking for an update to that line. And then you can determine how often you want updates on hot purchase orders. So Richard may determine that every Wednesday, any supplier with a hot PO, he wants an update on that purchase order, whether, at this time everything's still on target, or, we've been able to improve this by a couple days. Again, it's just that approach to make sure that with automation, we're keeping the buyers and the suppliers focused on the items that actually need their attention. We also have a way for suppliers to provide shipping information. This can be as simple or complex as required. It could be as simple as them saying, hey, this is shipped and here's the quantity that's shipped. Or it can get complex to where not only are they telling you that it's shipped and here's the quantity, they can provide tracking information, individual lot numbers, number of boxes, quantity in each box. And it's determined by, the customer and the users of which method they want to go with. But if you're going to use the ASN functionality, where it's the detailed advanced shipping notifications, this will have an actual advanced ASN number created. It also allows buyers and suppliers to generate a configurable barcode label. So it's a standardized barcode that all your suppliers can now provide. So, what we see is a lot of the really large suppliers probably already have barcode labels on their materials, but those smaller ones either don't have the capital or the overhead to provide labels or generate labels and attach it to the products. So with SourceDay, it's a free software for them, and just by keying in, small bits of information, they can generate this label and then supply it to their customer at all times. And then ASNs will also provide shipping information. So when they give you the tracking, when filling out the shipping information, we're actually linked to the major carriers so that we can pull down that tracking data right into SourceDay. So you're not having to copy and paste it out into Google or go to individual sites to find, where this package is at any given time. So a couple more things I want to quickly cover. One of them is going to be the history. So all this communication, these notifications going out, is logged in a history for the PO. And it's going to show us everything from when it first became a new active purchase order. We can see when the supplier had made an acknowledgement. It'll be time and date stamped with the actual username of who made the acknowledgement. And then we can see here where we marked it hot. Richard, as the buyer, decided that this was an important PO that he needed as soon as possible. So the supplier has shipped it, providing tracking. And this is great for multiple reasons. One, for the buyer that's managing hundreds or thousands of lines, they can now at a line level see all the history that's occurred for that PO line. But also, anyone else internally. We see, maybe 30% of emails that buyers are receiving are coming from someone in their own organization asking questions about a purchase order. So we have what we call a viewer user, kind of like a read-only account, that allows those members of the organization that need to know about POs and asking information from buyers to log in. They can see all of the details, they can look at the history, but they can't interact or touch anything. So they're not going to be able to accept or reject changes. They can't comment to suppliers. but they will have this access. They'll have access to the dashboard so they can see all of the late, radar, hot, shipped items. And then they can also subscribe, which signs them up for automatic updates for any purchase order line. So if it gets acknowledged, that subscriber is going to get an automatic notification from SourceDay saying, hey, your PO that you're interested in has now been acknowledged. If it gets moved out, moved in, a comment's added, it gets marked shipped, it gets received, all of those trigger notifications. And again, it takes that off of the buyers, so they're now not, the internal information center updating everyone in their organization, as well as trying to make sure that the suppliers have everything that they need to stay updated and update them back on things like late or radar POs. Then the very last thing I want to show before I turn it back over to Clint is going to be our supplier scorecard. So we are grading suppliers. This is automatic in real time. Our scorecard is configurable and weightable, so each of these segments can be configured to the company's needs, as well as each segment can be weighted, determining the impact they individually have on the overall score. Two of them I want to quickly talk about of the four. One is quality. So we have a couple ways we handle quality. One, if there's a quality management or control system in place that you're using, or if you're logging quality data currently in your ERP, we can integrate to that to pull down those failures and feed the quality score. The second way we pull quality is we have a quality module built into SourceDay, which allows you to log failures, communicate those failures to your suppliers, and then ultimately feed this grade. And then the third thing I'll mention on quality is it can be disabled. So if for any reason, maybe you're just not ready to start grading quality, you're like, let's start with price variance, on time and responsiveness, and we'll get back, we'll start quality afterwards. You can disable quality, and then whenever you're ready, you can enable it, and then we'll begin tracking that data for you, whether we're getting it from an ERP or a quality management system, or you're using SourceDay's quality to provide that information. The second one I want to talk to is responsiveness. So this one's really key to SourceDay. I showed you that history with time and date stamps and interactions. Well, we use that data to track exactly how responsive suppliers are with your company. So we know when a supplier was asked to take action, we know when the action was taking place, and again, that drives down to the actual details, which data-driven gives us a score. Ideally, what we wanted to do is take emotion out of this grading. We've seen some customers that have told us that they were grading responsiveness, and we asked, we're like, hey, just out of curiosity, how are you doing that today? And they said, well, we just rely on the buyers. We'll ask the buyer, how responsive is Chromax? And the buyers normally would start with, I feel. Oh, I feel they do pretty well, or I feel they could improve a little bit. I think it takes them a long time to get back to me. Where with SourceDay, we take feeling out, data-driven. Here's exactly how responsive they are to your company. And then now we can strategically move forward and improve that score. And then the very last thing I'll mention on the scorecard is this can be enabled for your suppliers to view as well. And that's supplier specific. So you can determine what supplier does or does not have access to this. It's completely up to you. But if they have access, this allows them to now self-grade. So now they can start reviewing their scores, see the areas that need improvement, and regardless of the next quarterly or annual business review, they can work on becoming a better supplier to the company, proactively, and never question where they currently stand. So with that, that is a pretty high level of the products. I know we went over things quite quickly. I would like to pass it back over to Clint. Clint, I think you're able to hear us now. And then if you have any slides.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip. And I apologize to everyone for losing my audio there. But let's face it, in my world, you guys wanted to hear Philip more than you wanted to hear me anyway. So it probably all worked out. Yes, let me just pull this slide up real quick. Perfect. All right. So with that, again, thank you very much, Philip. I was one slide away from finishing my presentation, so we didn't really miss out much there. Do appreciate you going through that for everyone. So I guess if you have any questions, we can field some questions now. If anyone has any out there that you'd like us to answer, If you would like to work directly with PeopleSense on it, I put up Brian's information and Gary's information depending on the ERP that you have. So you can reach out there directly with your questions, and then of course they'll funnel those to us, and we'll get those answered. But we do have a couple of minutes, and so if you have a couple of questions, we'll be happy to answer those. Okay. All right. So if there's no questions, Brian, I'll turn it back over to you to close things out.
Question. Is there a question that's what languages are supported? There, one of the meeting. Somebody said that. So.
I see that in the chat. Yes. Thanks for pointing that out. And there's also a question about cost. Yeah. So the languages supported. We use the browser to help us with doing the language support. So like on the supply chain side, it's like someone maybe has put us on hold here. But on the supply chain side, we have users all over the world. We've got China, Japan.
Every effort is being made to make your wait as short as
possible. It's on hold. You probably need to mute them.
Okay, well, let me see if we can mute
Barry Collins, if you can mute Barry.
Okay. Barry?
He's in there. Yeah, he's in the list there.
Thank you for holding. Someone will be right with you.
Not letting you mute him.
Okay, I think
there
we
you
got
go.
it. Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right. So, yeah. So the question about language support. So we support multiple languages in the platform, as I mentioned. You know, like we have Dell's user, and they've got users all over the world. So we just would need to probably know specifically what language you're interested in. But you know, China, Japan, France, of course, English, Mexico. You know, so we got a lot of the basics covered. And then I think there was a question about someone just asked about Chinese. Yes, that is correct.
Chinese, and someone asked about the cost. So.
Yeah, so cost is one of those things that, of course, it depends. I can tell you what cost is based off of. We license by the buyer account, and Philip has shown you guys the read-only license. So it's based off buyer licenses and read-only licenses. There are no fees for your suppliers. So all of the supplier functionality, accessing SourceDay to it with a browser, getting a login, their training, and all the support that they would need is all provided for free to the supplier. So there's no fee to the supplier. So that helps sort of eliminate some barrier to entry for them. But it's based off of overall price is based off of the buyer account mostly. And so if you have some specifics about pricing, what we'd want to do is we need to just have a quick conversation with you to understand how many buyers you have, how many read-only licenses you have. So it's not a platform fee, it's more of a user fee. So we just need to understand how many users you have and give you a sense for what it'll cost. Can suppliers upload their updates instead of going through the list of line items one by one? Yes, they can. And so we didn't get into that in the demonstration today, but Dell, for example, their suppliers, they can download a CSV copy of all the PO lines on SourceDay. They can make their edits. They can add them to their ERPs. They actually download their information from their ERP into a CSV and upload that directly into SourceDay as well. So yes, they don't have to come in and do the line items just one-on-one. You can do it with a upload from a CSV file. Perfect. Any other questions out there? Those are great questions.
You can text them, or you can just ask them audio on the audio if you'd like.
Everyone but Barry.
Everyone but Barry, yes. Okay, and if anyone wants to have a one-on-one demo, I'm sure that we can set that up for you. It's just a matter of asking, and if you're a made to manage user, you ask me, Brian Tognoni, or if you're an intuitive user, ask Gary Cerny. and all the information is right there on the screen. We certainly like, if you have any other questions, or if you just want to ask questions specifically about your company, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, question is, can we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we'll make that available to the PeopleSense team, and they can forward that on to you guys.
Well, plus this is being recorded, and it'll be on our website later this week. The entire presentation will be. We have a previous presentation that's already there. If you want to go on our website, you go under products, and you'll come down to the drop down will take you to it. So we will have this meeting or this webinar. It's being recorded right now, so it'll be up for you to look at later on. But even better, we'll do a one-on-one with you. All you have to do is ask.
Yeah, perfect. Looks like there's another question here. How much time is required for implementation internally? I'm very glad you asked that question, because it's something that I didn't get a chance to speak to. When we think about ERP projects, a lot of times we can think about them taking a long time. Sometimes they never end. SourceDay is not that. We are a quick turnkey solution for you. There's two parts to it. There's the integration. So there's actually the technical integration. That takes a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, when we get the integration ironed out. Once the integration is up and running, then we work on onboarding the users. And this is setting up your buying team on the platform. This is setting up your supplying team on the platform. And what we like to do there is we like for all of that to be done within about 90 days. So from you signing the contract to starting to see value in the platform is about 90 days. And looks like there's another question. How long has the software been around, i.e., how new, bugs, etc.? Great, yeah. So we founded the company in 2013. We were kind of working in an offline mode for a while. We released our first generally available solution to the world in 2015. And so, there's the product has been pretty battle tested. We've got 3,000 to 4,000 users on the platform today, all using it. Most of which are suppliers, but it definitely has been battle tested and continues to do so, because we add quite a few new customers to the platform every month.
Okay, do we have anyone else? I did want to announce that PeopleSense is going to be having a user group meeting in the Chicago area in February 21st. So if those of you that live around this area, if you want to fly into Chicago, we'll be announcing the particulars on that. SourceDay will be there, and you can talk to them personally at that meeting, along with some of our other third-party products, and of course we'll be discussing Made to Manage and Intuitive at that meeting, very similar to most user groups if you've gone to them before. We will be having user group meetings throughout the year in different areas, down Houston and in LA, possibly in Boston. So you look for those to be announced in the future. Anything else?
Looks like one more question popped in to the chat window here. Is it possible to get references, talk to your customers to get their thoughts? Absolutely. We definitely can set that up for you.
Okay. Well, if we have nothing else, Clint, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, it looks like one more little question popped in here.
Oh,
let me answer that real quick. Yeah, are attachments managed through the portal site, or can they be linked to another source? Need to dig in and maybe understand that a little bit better, but we can do it both ways. All right, so the way the product is set up today out of the box is you load documents in and link them. But we do have customers with that maybe want us to access their documents through an API or something like that. So there's a variety of ways that we can actually get to the data. It really it boils down to how organized you have those files. If you have ways for us to be able to understand the logic through the way you've either have file names or have them structured, then we can do those kind of things. But if it's not very structured, then it makes it difficult for us to be able to just pull data out of like an FTP site, for example. And oh yeah, so one more question: is it hosted in the cloud? So yes, it is. It is an application that SourceDay is actually on Amazon's EC2 cloud, and all the storage is S3. So we get the benefit of having a very world-class backbone to manage our system. And it also allows us to be able to quickly spin up environments and add more horsepower to the system when we bring on new customers or we have a heavy load or something like that. So it's yeah, but it is in the cloud.
Okay, so I want to remind everyone that most of this, a lot of information about SourceDay and many other things that PeopleSense ERP does are on www.peoplesenseerp.com. And all of you went on there to register for this seminar or this webinar, and you can find a lot of information on that and for upcoming webinars in the future. All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, PeopleSense. I appreciate it. Gary, Brian, thank you for your time today. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out and I'll get it addressed for you.
All right. Thank you much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.